just as the title says. I'm an EMS worker, and last night I experienced one of the strangest and downright scariest things I've ever seen. And I can't quite explain what it was. It's been the only thing that's been on my mind since. And I haven't told any of my peers or the higher-ups, since they'd call me a nutcase and would probably make me the #1 suspect. For context, I live in Romania. Moved here when I was little. Apparently my parents are from here and decided to move back to their roots. Here in Romania, at least in this local region where I live, there's a special type of EMS worker. One that can get called out independently to calls for things like welfare checks and any non-serious medical situations that a single person can take care of. Due to typically being alone, we are issued with safety equipment in case of things like mental health checks that end up turning sour. A single can of effective mace and a high-powered taser is all that we got. If an event that prompts this is to occur and gets out of control that we can't handle by ourselves, we're issued radios just like any other emergency service to call in and request for backup or police intervention. Alongside that, we are also given our own vehicles, a smaller version of an ambulance, similar to the size of an SUV, with a back section dedicated to medical equipment and other assorted items that may be needed if a call ends up turning into an emergency. Things like IVs, a stretcher, and even an EKG. They really tried to stuff the essentials into the back of this thing. With that introduction out of the way, this takes us back to last night. I was in the ambulance, parked in the parking lot of a local fast food joint eating my very late dinner and waiting for my shift to end. It had been a pretty lazy night, not too many calls that would require me to. Only calls I had gotten were a call from a distressed mother over her son having an allergic reaction, peanuts, and a mental health check. A detail that I didn't really expand on above is that this job kinda serves multiple purposes, while my main job is medical. I can also be called in for things like petty crime or unarmed conflict, and if I need to be and there's no one else that can reach an emergency in time, more major incidents. Which was exactly the thing that happened, and as I was sitting in my ambulance when the radio blared to life with the operator on the other side, ES 79. There's a 10 to 66 nearby you. The closest patrol is over 2 hours away. Do you copy? That previous mental health check was out in a rural part of the town. I'd been just close enough to be able to take it and had been out here since. I sighed as I picked it up. It was a rare circumstance, but it seemed like I was needed. ES 79 copy, what's the sitch? I spoke into the receiver as I swallowed that last portion of my meal. Dispatch responded with, a supposed suspicious figure has been reported by the homeowner, and didn't seem too frightened or worried. But the lady on the other end hung up after asking to see if we could send someone over there for a check. Could just be a wild animal, can you take it? I felt relieved. I thought it may have been something serious. I let out a breath and responded, yeah, I can take it. What's the address? The drive over there still took well over 15 minutes. The house seemed to almost be in the middle of absolute nowhere. I had to drive down all these different paths just to find the right driveway of the main road. But I finally found it. An old-style cabin at the end of a long gravel path. I rolled up to the outside and got out of the vehicle, grabbing my med bag and slung it over my shoulder just in case, and walked up the path to the front door, my sneakers crunching and rustling the loose rocks beneath me as the forest sounded absolutely still. It was the dead of night and my nerves went from being laid back to having the hair on the back of my neck stand straight. Walking up the small stone stair was when I saw it. The door was left open, no sign of forced entry, but also seemed like it had forgotten to be closed. Approaching the door, I smelled something. It was really faint, but like metal, like the way an old piece of silverware tastes, similar to old coins. I stood there for a moment or two. Everything up to that point had felt normal, but being in the middle of nowhere with a door left ajar in the middle of the night, I could feel my hands shaking. I had to grab my wrist with my hand as I attempted to knock. It was faint, but pushed the door the rest of the way open. Looking into the single-story cabin, I realized I hadn't been breathing. I took a moment to calm my nerves, and swallowed the lump in my throat as I spoke out, "Hello? Anyone home?" I got a call about a suspicious figure. Looking back, I know my voice certainly wasn't loud enough, but I could hear it bounce off the absolute still of the house. After a few moments that felt like hours of standing in the doorway waiting for a response, I could feel that my nerves still weren't calm. Something definitely wasn't right. I pulled out the mace that was on my belt and walked into the cabin. Looking around, everything seemed fine, no disturbances or anything. Like everything had been turned off for the night. To the right was a living room, sofa, and television. While to the left was a small hallway with a door at the end. Staring down the pitch-black hall, I could see a door opened at the other end, a void even darker than the hallway permeating from within. As I stood there, it felt like the world was spinning. I could hear the beat in my ear thumping away, the smell from the front door even more pungent now. Clear enough I could tell what it was. Blood. Remembering to breathe again, I reached my hand down and unholstered my taser and held it out in front of me and shakily walked down the corridor, my sneakers muffled by the carpet beneath them as I approached the door frame, standing just inside the room, with the smell of iron and blood filling the room like a slaughterhouse. I heard it. Squelching, dripping, and sounds of squeezing reverberating all throughout the tiny room. It was grotesque. My eyes had been adjusted to the dark, and could see the faintest outline of a figure just in front of me. Large and gaunt, crouched over another smaller form. My hand slowly lowered, at a near snail's pace, to silently reach for my light that was attached to my vest. The can of mace still in hand while the taser was out held, my thumb gently pushing in the button to suddenly illuminate the room in full. The scene was absolutely horrific. Laid in front of me was what looked to be a man clad head to toe in black. A bald head of pale white skin leaned over what I could only assume to be the once living homeowner, her blood covering the long gaunt and clawed fingers of the figure in front of me. Crimson splattered and pooled all around the room. As soon as the light hit the pale-skinned figure, it whipped around immediately. Its face. Skin hung sunken against its skull, its eyes were like pale orbs, irises yellow. Lined with red as though they were bloodshot, and seemed to have an almost animalistic glare to its pupils. My voice hitched as I saw the horrific visage, my finger twitched and pushed down on the button of the mace. But it mattered not. Just as liquid was expelled from its casing, the creature had swiveled around and lunged right at me. It was so fast that I couldn't even process it, like a blur of speed. But it stopped halfway and recoiled backwards for just a moment, almost in annoyance, before sweeping its talons through the air, slicing the metal canister in half, and in the same motion with the same dizzying speed, backhanded me straight into the wall. The impact was so harsh I surely thought that one of my ribs was broken. The wind completely knocked out of me, laying limp against the wall, trying to catch my breath. The beam of light from my flashlight illuminating the ceiling as I heaved. I surely thought I was gonna be the next victim. But as the next excruciating and terror-filled second passed, I regained my breath. Looking around, I saw that whatever was there was gone. Backup had been called almost immediately after I hadn't reported in that I had reached the cabin, and was able to get there in half an hour. I stayed slumped against the wall the entire time. Time seeming to pass in a blur as memories of that thing replayed through my mind. There's an investigation ongoing that won't go anywhere. I told them what I could. That I walked into the house, and called out to no answer. And when I entered the room and saw the gruesome scene inside, I was knocked into the wall. Next moment, whoever was there was gone. I'm told I'm lucky to be in good health, having only sprained a muscle in my chest. The vest that I wore took the brunt of the impact. It was left in pieces from what I heard. I remember as I was helped out of the room when the others arrived, looking back to the wall. Cracks filling it like a sledgehammer had been taken to it. Whatever that thing was. I don't know how it could be that strong, and that fast, and it's still out there.